Yeah, hello and welcome to another episode of the weekly Spielworxx chat, season 2. My name is Uli Blennemann and I hope you are all well. And today is a special episode because basically I'm my own guest. So, Ode, which you see here, the famous Andreas Odendahl, designer extraordinaire, he will ask me some questions. So, Ode, how are you?
Hi, Oli. Thank you for having me as your guest host. I'm pretty fine. I hope you as well.
I am interested in hearing some questions. Then I know if I'm fine. So yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see.
it will be inquisitive.
Yeah, okay, okay. And if you have questions here, please put them in the chat window and we will respond. But before we actually start, let me quickly mention a few Spielworxx news items. So the replacements for the replacements cubes for the Tharos Kickstarter backers in the US and Canada, they actually have arrived at Capstone Games, our fulfillment partner. So really, I'm glad that this worked out pretty fast. And Matt Wolf's fantastic Squaring Circle Will game is on track. The game is supposed to be released on October 4, so that is the day that right now it is planned for. The German edition of Pax Pamir is still on track, and hopefully more news very soon. But there is a delay for sure for John Company German edition. The pre-orders will probably not start before December because Drew and Cole, they are still finishing the English language edition. So, and of course I need to wait still till I can start with the localization till they when they have finished their edition. Captains of the Guards, the second edition, I had a few copies in my web shop that is already sold out, but I have very few, so less than 10 copies remaining of Crescent City Cargo, the second game in the Cajun trilogy by my good friend Jason Dinger, and hopefully late this week. So I will have available a limited number of copies of Kalle Schmiel's new Tribune edition. So hopefully this will work out as well. And final item, remember Conworks. This is Spielworxx's own small and cozy online convention with some wonderful guests and exciting topics. This is happening on October 1 and 2. So, more details soon, and you can look up already some details. There's a special page on my website. So, mark your calendars for Conworks. But now back to order. So, I'm excited somewhat.
Okay, so let me take over now. Hello, dear Spielworxx Ultras. Today will be a little bit different. My name, like Uli mentioned, is Andreas Odendahl, but everybody except my family calls me Ode, so let's keep it this way. And I will be your host today. Uli will be my guest. Thank you for being here, Uli.
Yeah, I can't escape now, right?
So the idea for this came to me after seeing the very brilliant episode of the weekly Spielworxx chat with Wolfgang Lüttke, and I thought to myself, because they were talking about business, board game history, you could maybe say, I thought to myself, hey, Uli is also one of the people who goes way back in the board game business, and an interview with him would be incredibly interesting. And since I am always also a very big Spielworxx fan myself, I would love to see this. And I said, Uli, you told everybody that you are into ideas or what you can do on your weekly chat. And I said, okay, I will interview you and you will have to answer me. And that's what we're doing today. And so here we are now.
Wonderful. So I'm excited. I need to quickly say hello to Brick TV. He's saying, "Oh, hello, Uli, can't wait for Tharos to arrive." So you're probably from Canada or the US, and he's saying, "I'm sure it's been worth the wait." Yeah, hopefully you like the game. But let's start now.
Okay. Yeah, so Uli, I know that you have a long history in playing all kinds of historic games and war games with your brother. There was a very long episode of a German podcast where you talked about it, and I thought let's tell it to our English viewers as well. So, how did you get socialized board game wise in this time, and how did it lead to playing Euro games? But uh, maybe a little short,
Yeah.
a brief look into your past as a wargamer with your brother.
Yeah, so we played games at home all the time, and I was lucky as a kid and as a teen that I had an older brother. He's 3 years older, so we could play all types of board games at home. So standard Euro type fare mainly, but we both have an interest in history, and then we discovered war games from the US, and we bought our first ones, and then we started playing them, and again it was very good. Most games at that time, war games still today probably, are two-player games. So, and I had readily available already an opponent, so we started, that was in 79. So when we bought our first war game in Düsseldorf at Fantastic Shop, and one thing came to the others. But we actually did not stop playing Eurotype games, but at that time it was war games, war games, war games, and sometimes some Euro games, but mainly war games.
So 1979 was also, if you're interested, the year that Bayer Leverkusen went to the Bundesliga. So it's a very long time ago.
So you see some good things. I started playing war games, and some bad
Uh,
things happening. So
uh, Very good Counter-Strike here. Okay, so what was your first job in the business, and how did you stumble upon this one? Moments in history? Is this
moments in
something?
history, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was studying in Bochum at that time in the Ruhr area. So if you ever were to Essen, as you listeners, you know that this is the industrial heart of Germany, and Bochum is a neighboring city. And I studied there, and I studied history. And at the end of my studies, I suddenly thought, wow, what do I do with my studies now? So I need to find a job now. And then I thought, well, and then as some young people are, so I would never try this again today, but I thought, well, let's form a board game industry. So I was a wargamer, so I thought, let's start a wargaming company. And this is what I did in 93, Moments in History. And these were just English language war games printed in the US and mainly sold in the US. So that was my first company. But I planned at that time. I'd finished my history study, so I said, well, I do this half time, and the other half of the day I finish my PhD thesis. But also, as a young person, if you start getting some money in your hands, so I'm not talking about huge amounts, but for me, as a young former student, I thought, wow, this is nice. So why finish the PhD thesis? Let's concentrate on selling some games. And so I never finished that thesis. And yeah, well, that's gaming. What gaming can do.
And how long was your endeavor with Moments in History?
I did this till early 99, so not that long. I think the first game I published was 94, so I formed the company 93, first game. But this was by accident. So one day in Germany, I was still living in Hattingen at that time, also in the Ruhr area. I got a phone call, and there was a guy from the US, and he said, I want to buy Moments in History. And I thought at first this has to be Candid Camera, or this must be a joke. But because basically, although the company had no debt, so there was no real value. It was just a typical small wargame company and nothing else. I had no real hits in there. So I won some awards for the Charles S. Roberts Awards. These are the most important wargaming awards. I won them for All Quiet on the Western Front and Fields of Glory, but still no real hits there. So I thought it was a joke, but I said, yeah, let's discuss. And within a month, I sold the whole company. And so that was incredibly lucky for me because yeah,
But
it was nice.
but let's just clear this up. This was not Asmodee, right?
It was not Asmodee at that time. Nobody thought about Asmodee, no known name at all. No, it was a company. I'm pretty sure they are still active, called Critical Hit from New
Mhm.
York, and yeah, done quickly and yeah.
Nice. So this was around the 2000 years, end of the millennium.
99. It was in
Yeah.
January 99, and at that time I thought, well, let's now not do anything in gaming anymore. Let's do something very different. But that also did not last too long.
Okay. Okay. So that was actually the time that I started gaming on more serious terms, and then there was a publishing company named Phalanx Games, and
Mhm.
the games published by this company were the ones that I first heard the name Uli Blennemann,
Mhm.
because you worked for this company
Mhm.
in the 2000 years. Is this right?
This is absolutely right. So the owner of Phalanx Games is Michael Bruinsma, or was Michael Bruinsma. And he's also the owner of 999 Games, which is
Oh,
right now the largest Dutch gaming company. So he has licenses for Catan, for Carcassonne, for a lot of very popular games. And in the 90s, he also sold, and also I think still in the 2000s, he sold Magic. So that was also some very nice thing. But I know Michael from the 80s because Michael is also a wargamer. So we had
oh,
met in Germany, we had met in the Netherlands at very smallish wargaming conventions, and we knew each other. And in 2001, I got a phone call from him, and he said, "Let's start a new company and let's meet." And at that time, I was working for a sports magazine and book publisher, and I said, "Well, let's." At least let's discuss. And yeah, one discussion, one evening, some wines, and then I moved over to, and we started Phalanx Games in 2001, I think.
okay. So the games published there were, some of them were very, very nice, very, very cool Euro games that I loved back then, because, to my personal recollection, Phalanx Games was one of the publishers that published the real big games. So, like, back in the day, it was like today, maybe Eggert Spiele or Lookout Games.
Mm-hmm.
And Phalanx Games had all these great Euro games.
Mm-hmm.
But also, Phalanx Games had many war games or historic games.
Absolutely.
And was this your doing as well?
No, actually, first I have to say hello to Chris. Greetings to the UK. Good seeing you. So, as I said, Michael and I, we are wargamers. And Michael had the idea, let's do some heavier Eurotype games, but also let's do some war games. And actually, we had no game at all when we started. We just, but we started, or I contacted some people and we got the license for A House Divided. At that time, a pretty popular game, but long out of print, a war game on the American Civil War. And so we did this as our first game, and then we had a Waterloo game. So we started with deliberately with some war games. But after a while, of course, some designers, authors, they sent us in prototypes. And these were mainly, of course, Eurotype games. So we also then moved more and more away from the war games to the Euro games.
Okay, I just shared my screen to show one of the games that
Mm-hmm.
was published by Phalanx Games. This was one of the war games, right?
Yeah, it's Italia by Andreas Steding, who is still active. As you all know, he is the designer of the forthcoming Stroganov. He did Hansa Teutonica and quite a few other games. But Italia is a really interesting game because a lot of people may know Britannia, which is, I think, still around now, done by PSC Games, but it was done by Fantasy Flight, by Gibson Brothers, so a real very strong seller over 20 or 30 years. And Italia basically uses the Britannia system and transform it to ancient Italy and the Mediterranean area. And it has lots of pieces, large game board. And if you are a fan of Britannia, I think you'll love Italia. But the Britannia system is very deterministic, so it's not to everyone's taste.
Okay, and just to show here, that the line of games you published was quite. You had a style of boxes. These boxes were very huge, and you also published games like Maharaja, which was in German Raja, I
Right?
think,
You're right.
which was one of the first games we really fell in love with from Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling, who are responsible for many great board games. And this was one of the games that you published with Phalanx Games.
Right. This was, I think, 2004, and it was nominated for the Game of the Year. It's a beautiful game, in my opinion, and it has marble pieces in there, especially for that time. Nowadays, even the box size is not special anymore, but we deliberately had large boxes and then this cinematic box fronts. So, like the old movies from the 50s in television, when they were black and white, you had always a top and a down band there, and then the picture was in between. So we deliberately did this, and I think Maharaja has been re-released pretty recently in a new edition. But I've heard, I haven't seen this edition, that they changed the victory conditions now to more point system, which I can't really understand, because one of the good things in Maharaja is that it's a race game. The first player who has built, I think, 7 palaces, I'm not really sure, is a winner. But race games are so difficult, as you know, Ole, so difficult to design and to balance, because the first player who achieved this is a winner and all the others can't do anything more. But I think it worked brilliantly in Raja, and nowadays, it's apparently just back to victory points. Yeah.
So the reason, to my opinion, that many race games are very hard to design is that tension normally drops at the end, and that's very hard to design. But
Indeed.
Maharaja was really good game, and I'm just showing here a few covers of the games that you published, so that everybody can see that there was consistency in the way you publish games here. Mesopotamia was done by Klaus-Jürgen Wrede, who is the designer of Carcassonne. So you had the big designers of that time, like Kiesling and Kramer, Wrede, and also one of my favorite ones.
Yes.
This was a very good one. This was a family style game by Günther Cornett. Very cool. What I wanted to show was here Martin Wallace. You also had Martin Wallace, one of my favorite designers, and Steam was a very cool train game.
Yeah, let me briefly interrupt. What we did with Phalanx also was that we always published in at least 3 languages to get the costs down. So we published a German edition, an English language edition, and a Dutch edition, because Phalanx was a Dutch company. And here you see on this cover, it's Mayfair Games, because this is the English edition of the game.
Yeah.
So our English language partner at first was Fantasy Flight Games, still independent, and then later for most of the years it was Mayfair Games. And in Germany we had several distributors, but published under the Phalanx label as well, of course, in the Netherlands. Yeah, and some of these designers like Wallace, like Vrede, like Kramer Kiesling, they were happy that we told them we have basically no constraints. You give us a game, we make it beautiful, and we try to sell it. Whereas, especially at that time in Germany, lots of the German companies said, well, we can't sell a game that costs more than 20 euros, 25. No, this can't be this. This is too big. This has to go out. Therefore, the marbles in Maharaja. But nowadays, with lots of plastic, with China screen printing on wood, of course, this seems strange. But please remember, this is a long time ago. And yeah, this is a great game by Martin Wallace, Rise of Empires. Artwork by Charney, which is controversial. Some like it, some like it not. I like it a lot because it has three different eras in the game. It has also a brilliant mechanic that you, Ode,
Yes.
probably like a lot. This mirror thing, action front, then you go back and front again. And here you see you are in ancient times, you are in early modern times, and then in modern times. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
this was actually one of the experiences with board games. This is a civilization type board game from the more Euro side, maybe. But this was one of my first experiences with Civ type games, and I really loved this one. And especially, like you said, you were totally right. The action selection mechanism was pretty cool
yeah.
because you in one round you would fill up some tracks, some action tracks, and on the next round you would take the action markers back, and you have to perform the same action again. So there was a lot of strategic planning, and I actually one of my first prototypes that I personally designed was trying to redesign this action selection mechanism into a rondelle,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
I totally failed. This game was rubbish.
Yeah, but it happens. But I have to say, now that I see this cover for the first time since several years, these are great memories. And Martin
Right.
actually at BGG Con 2019, he showed me a new game, a science fiction game. Using that mechanism, but I did not
Oh,
like it. The game, the mechanism is still very strong, but the game was not too good actually. And Matt here has a question. Hello, Matt, by the way. He has a question or a comment. And he's saying, your long-standing relationship with the owner of 999 Games explains why they were interested in learning more about squaring circle. Indeed. I will meet them at Essen in October and we will talk about the game. So let's hope that something comes out of this. Yeah.
yeah, I was also very lucky that you had this connection because they also published Lorania in Dutch.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great company, great people. Very Dutch though, so which is, in my opinion, very positive. But some may think, well, especially we bloody Germans sometimes see it differently. And this is also so, if I may say, we now talk, and of course, memories are most of the time are positive. But at Phalanx, quite a few games were not 100% developed because first we had to do it, everything was very quick, it had to be done, done, next one, next one, next one, which I did not like a lot, but for the Dutch people it was okay. They said, well, yeah, that's fine, let's move it to printing. Yeah. Let's leave it here.
Let's leave it there.
Michael, I still love you and I hope to see you in a month. And yeah, well, it was my honor working for Phalanx Games in the Netherlands. And by the way, there, as lots of people may know, Phalanx Games is still around, but Phalanx Poland, because actually at that time they approached us and said, can we come under the Phalanx umbrella? and I can't remember how this happened, but they were able. But then Phalanx stopped in 2009, and they were allowed to get independent, and they have a different logo now and all these things. But that's why there is still a Phalanx Games, but it's now not connected to this Dutch
Mm.
origin at all. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just point out that back with when you were with Phalanx Games, you published very heavy games, Euro games, you published war games, and you also published family style games like Pack Ice on Pole, which is in
Hey,
English.
that's my fish,
Hey, that's my fish. Yes.
which is still in print at Fantasy Flight Games. So yeah.
Okay, and to my personal recollection, you were one, or Phalanx Games was one of the big publishers here in Germany or Europe, publishing family German games, maybe, or what you could say now called Euro games. And then Phalanx Games stopped, like you just said, in 2009. And what happened then? I think maybe something on your own, maybe another new company.
Yeah, in 2009. So, as I just hinted on, um, I both loved to work for a Phalanx game. So I was brand manager. That was my official job description. Um,
Nice.
Very important. No, it was just I had to do basically everything. So it became very difficult to do this, and especially when you know that this may be a great game, but we will release it when it's a good game. And so I said, and I had my history of doing my own thing, publishing my own games via Moments in History. So I said, let's try something again where I'm saying this game has to be published. And there's a very nice story with Michael. And really, this may sound strange, but Michael, I love him. He's one of my best buddies. He's a wonderful person. I can only say this. But we, on a Saturday at Essen, in the old halls, and it was packed, not as packed as maybe in 2019 and 18. But I went to a meeting in this direction from right to left, and he was moving on a Saturday in the opposite direction. And we weren't even able to stop in the midst of the traffic. So he told me while passing, Uli, and he was very excited, I've just signed another game. And I thought, wow, no, not again. Because Michael is a gamer at heart. He's a business person, a successful business person, but he's first and foremost a gamer. So he was in a meeting with the designer and he loved the prototype. And after 30 minutes, he signed the game. So we had another Phalanx game. So I thought, let's maybe test this first. And but these were the time. But he's really one of the nicest persons I ever met. And if there was a problem or if I was in need of something, he was my boss, no doubt about it. I just had to say, well, I need this, and it was done, done, done,
Mm.
done. And in even in private matters, so fantastic. Yeah,
So a person you can rely on.
absolutely. If you can grab him, but
Okay.
because he's the boss and he does what what he does and without asking. So he has a wonderful, really wonderful, and I was able to visit this and spend some time over there. Wonderful house at Ibiza in the Baleares, so in the Mediterranean, directly in
Not
the
bad.
coast, not in the party area down south. But island is so small, you can be in the party area by car very quickly. But down, far up in the north at the coast, so wonderful. And yeah, sometimes he said, well, I'm leaving for Ibiza. And maybe in the office in the Netherlands, some people knew it. But in Germany, I was always living in Germany and doing my stuff from home. I didn't even knew this. And at that time, internet wasn't widely available on Ibiza, so you had to rely on phone. And if there was a fair or something very pressing, could be
Was
also nice. But
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so I think quickly after Phalanx Games, you decided to do this on your own again, and here is Spielworxx.
Yeah, and here's Spielworxx, but I have to get back to the chat for a
Yes,
second. There's
certainly.
Matt again, and he's saying you can ask them, so 999 Games, about the games they signed from me. Which mistake did they make, Matt, that they signed a game from you? So terrible. I will ask them. Of course, I will ask them at Essen. Great to hear. And there's Nick. Hello, Nick. The taxi driver is in the building. And he's making a comment to you, Ode. I never knew you were so tall, Ode. He's 2 meters 50, basically.
Yes, or maybe the half of that. Okay, but since we have Nick here, maybe I collected some questions over the last couple of days, and maybe let's go to Nick's question and as a little excursion before we go into Spielworxx. So, excluding anything you have published is Nick Case at Big Bad Lex on Twitter asking, "What are your top three favorite board games?" Uli.
Very difficult because my tastes change over the time.
Maybe let's go with today
Today
or this
is
time.
Today it's probably Empire of the Sun by Mark Herman. It's probably Pax Pamir, and my all top game right now is an Infamous Traffic, also by Cole Worley. Yeah, but it can change quickly, and it depends on my mood. And of course, for an Infamous Traffic, you need 4 to 5 people. And for Empire of the Sun, you need one really dedicated opponent as well. So, but yeah, these would be my 3 picks. And
Okay,
and Nick is
nice.
saying, quick change it to Tales of the Northlands. Of course, this is my. This is I mentioned 3 very good games, but there's one superb game that's Tales of the Northlands. So Nick, yeah,
Goes
of
without
course,
saying.
yeah, without saying.
Yeah. Okay, so go back to Spielworxx. So you decided to start your own company again because you wanted to publish war games, right?
Yeah,
Or for
basically yes. So I wanted to get back to my roots. So at the same time, I started Spielworxx not necessarily to do this full time. So I initially thought I localize some US war games and sell 500 copies only and sell them direct so that my profit margins per copy are pretty high. And then I work freelance for some other companies who had always asked me, can you do this, can you do this? So my network, for being at that time already 17 years in the business, was pretty large. And so I did this at first. But same thing as with Phalanx. We went from war games to Euro type games. And this seems to be happening again.
yeah, so this was I think it was 2012 when you published Rushefahrt.
Right.
What I was actually the first time I met you in Essen on the fair when I grabbed my copy of the game, and I was immediately fascinated by the game and loved it to the bone. So this was when my attention was drawn to Spielworxx. So, but you also mentioned that you were all the time working not only for Spielworxx, but also for other companies. And I also know that you worked for Blackfire, but I also heard rumors that you were working for Queen Games.
Oh yes. So yeah, I mean, that was a time of turmoil for Queen Games. So Queen Games, they had lots of success, especially with Alhambra, which won Game of the
Yes.
Year, and then they did some other games and a pretty well-known publisher. But their one and only editor, developer in-house was Bernd Dietrich. And I don't have to retell the story, but the owner of Queen Games and Bernd Dietrich, well, they didn't like each other that much anymore, so they parted and they needed some replacements. And so for a while, I worked, of course, just part time. I worked for Queen Games on some games. There were others, especially I have to mention Wolfgang Panny, who was in the episode with Wolfgang Lüttke, which you mentioned initially. He was one of the designers. He is the designer of this strange boxing game, and Wolfgang
Yeah.
had the photo in the episode. But he's a great designer. He's an old punk rocker, which you don't see anymore. So we were connected very well immediately. A wonderful person. But the same thing I asked Wolfgang in that episode. Do you have any contact to Wolfgang? I asked Wolfgang Lüttke, do you have any contact to Wolfgang Panning anymore? He does not. And I tried to reach him a couple of years ago, but the email is not working anymore. So I sadly lost contact. But a wonderful person, and with Dirk Henn, who is the, of course, the author of lots of very well-known games at Queen Games. He also did a lot of development with her wife Barbara for Queen Games. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, Wolfgang Panning is actually someone that introduced me to the, maybe you could say, the gamers society, you could say, maybe, because one of my first Essen experiences was getting a game explained by a designer. Was one of his games. It was called Flandern 13 something, which was an area control game. It was very early in the 2000 years. And he actually explained the game to us, and we were very fascinated because we met the designer. And this game is actually, like I said, action control, area control game. It's not well for two players. And I normally play all the games with my wife, and we love to have working games that work well with two players. And on the fair, he said, "Give me your email address. I will design a two-player variant, and I will send it to you." And a couple of weeks later, Wolfgang did send me this two-player version, and we had very lots of fun playing this game as a two-player game. And it was we just met the guy, and he promised us, and he said it was one of the greatest experiences that I had in Essen still, and
Yeah,
it was fantastic.
he is a wonderful person, really, a very warm person in gaming, very knowledgeable, and that's why I'm sad that I lost contact with him. And I maybe via Queen Games I can try to get in touch again. But I think we have time for one anecdote that is not really related to gaming with Wolfgang, but he told me because he's also a great storyteller, really great storyteller, and this is from his punk rock, amateur punk rock time. So he was in a band, he was a singer, but they were young and they had actually gigs in southern Germany. So he's from northern Germany, from the Bremen, I may be wrong, area. So they had a gig at Freiburg. So now next problem is how to get there over there with their equipment. And so a father of one of the other band members, he had a VW Volkswagen bus, so brand new, and they loaded everything in and said, wow, wonderful, and they drove all the way to Freiburg down. And they arrived pretty late because there were traffic accidents and all this. So they arrived very late, and there were already some punks outside of the building waiting for them. So they arrived with their brand new Volkswagen, and they climbed out of it, and everybody was booing because you are punks? How you are amateur punks? How can you have a brand new car? This is not the punk attitude. So everybody immediately disliked them because they arrived in a brand new car. Yeah, these were the times in the late 70s. Yeah,
Yeah,
well.
that's not a big street credibility here with a brand new van. Okay.
Yeah, it's too bad. And sorry, I need to interrupt you, Ode, again, because there are two
No.
pieces from Matt again. All these puzzle pieces dropping into place. No wonder you like Edo so much with your Queen Games connection. Did you work on Edo? No, I did not work on Edo. Actually, I think it was Wolfgang. And I played the game at Queen, and at that time I told them, don't do the game as it is. It's brilliant. I love the mechanism, but it's way too short. But at that time, at Queen Games, it was everything which we do needs to have a chance to win Game of the Year. And
Oh,
Game of the Year, that was company policy. And at that time, yeah, a game that is more than 60 minutes would be too long. So that why it is so short. And there's another question by Brick TV. What are your three favorite mechanisms commonly found in Euro games? Also
oh,
very
interesting.
difficult to say. Interesting. So I like dice
That,
manipulation, I like deck building, I like worker placement if done in an interesting way. Of course, in 2010, worker placement was different than it is now. But I think if, of course, these are very broad categories. There's deck building and there's deck building as a tool in a game, and there's much more. But right at the top of my from my heart, I would say these three mechanisms. Yeah.
okay, so maybe let's move a little bit further because Spielworxx is, I think, since we have all the ultras here in the chat and everybody knows Spielworxx as well. So let's maybe talk a little bit about the side projects that you did. The next one that you did was actually Blackfire, and here you as well published a lot of Euro, maybe family style, Kenner Spiel style games. Maybe, well, I actually know this because you already told me. Maybe these were games that were not fitting for Spielworxx, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about this and why they were not fitting.
Yeah, moving to Blackfire also was very interesting because Blackfire at that time was just a distributor in Germany and in Europe, but a very strong distributor, strongest magic distributor in all of Europe. Very strong, very good, very efficient. But what they did not have board games in stock. And my first goal was to bring in board games. So I did not work on their own game line, but bringing in board games with my knowledge. So when I started, Blackfire had maybe 5 or 6 board games in stock for sale all over Europe. And these were all Wizards of the Coast, Avalon Hill games. And when I finished, that was late, when I moved on in late 2017, they had all board games available that have any meaning in print. So that was my main job. And at the same time, they said, why not start our own game line? So I brought in some games like Kraftwagen from Matthias Kramer. And in my opinion, yes, these are some games that were maybe a little bit too light for Spielworxx. Although probably today I would say Kraftwagen would fit Spielworxx. But you see,
Mm,
Spielworxx also has changed a little bit.
yes.
So we had an Orkrite and then moved to a Gentis. And so today I would say Kraftwagen could be a Spielworxx game. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of my favorite of the Blackfire games, King's Will. I had a very, very interesting experience playing this as a four-player game. Very much tension in the game. This
And,
was a
and,
very cool one.
and Ode, we still see some gray screen over
Oh,
there with some parts of Kraftwagen, so we can't see Kingsville.
okay. So it's not working very well. Um, Here I am again.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, but Kingsville is indeed a very nice game by Hans-Peter Stoll, a wonderful person as well, very talented, and he is now in the Spieleautorenzunft,
mm,
one of the leading figures, and he is very strong in improv theater. And Kingsville, what is interesting, which draws me to the game, is that has this role selection mechanism. You select something, and all the others may do it as well, but not
yes,
that good, like Puerto Rico,
yes.
for example. And this works very nicely in Kingsville.
No, it was actually that each action had two actions, And if you choose it, you can do both. But if you would play along, then you can only choose one of the actions.
So
This
your
was
memory is it's
yeah.
much better. And Matt is saying he's also liking Kingsville, and I knew Matt is saying Ode had good taste. Matt, you don't know Ode. He is a Bayer Leverkusen fan. He has no taste at all. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's a different thing. Okay, so there was also a very good game I would like to mention was War of the Buttons, which is very underrated in my opinion because it's a dice placement game that's also bidding with dice, and this actually is one of the games that I would say is a Eurostyle game. But since it's about this kids gangs war, his story from a book, the game is war with dice. It's actually very, very thematic for just being a small little dice placer. So this was very impressive.
Yeah, I think it is an impressive game. And again, it's Andreas Steding. So always the same
Yes.
name. Italia, we had him before. So he did War of the Buttons. And especially in France, this is a very strong license because everybody has seen the movie. There's also a newer movie which is not good. In Germany, when I was a kid, they had each year black and white, the first movie. So I knew Krieg der Knöpfe in Germany. We knew everything about it, and we had high hopes for this game. But actually, this was already the time when Blackfire, and no bad intentions, was already moving out of all
Mm,
this. Because the
yes.
talks of Blackfire to Asmodee,
Now
they
they are there.
they now we are talking about Asmodee. Is the phone ringing? Do they want to sell Spiel? No, do they want to buy Spielworxx? No, they don't want to. The talks that Asmodee is buying Blackfire because they needed a strong, or they thought they needed another strong distributor in Europe. They started 1 year before the actual sale was made, so everybody knew about it, that it will eventually happen. And Asmodee made it pretty clear that they want the distributor, but they don't need
Mm.
another game line,
I
which
am.
is which is which is done by Blackfire. And you know this order because you published the wonderful, great No Siesta at Blackfire, and this was actually a roll and write before people actually talked about roll and write, and this was a genre of games. So you were ahead of the times.
Thank you very much for these nice words. Yes, I'm actually pretty proud of this one because this is a roll and write game that's very strategic, and one of my favorite was Roll Through the Ages, and this was one of the role models. And I wanted to achieve something like this, that you have a small, very light uh, roll and write board game that has a strategic approach. And yes, I think that was very cool. And yes, you did the editing job for this, and it was very very nice one.
Yeah, we had some problems, of course, with this. Not only that we knew that Blackfire publishing, but it was co-published with, oh, there is no siesta. Yeah, wonderful. And this was co-published with the wonderful Stephen Warner Core of Stronghold Games.
Yes,
But Stronghold Games, and this is how publishing is done. So it was a co-printing, and Stronghold had Diamond or Diamonds, I'm not sure, in their
Diamond, I
lineup.
think.
And this is a very small but very high box. And they
Uh,
wanted something in that box. So we printed it and released it in that box. And I think a box that is double that size would have been so much better because people were getting out the rules booklet and seeing, whoa, this is complex. But on each page, there is not a lot of text. So, yeah.
mm.
But this is what's happening in
Yeah, but
co-printing.
but the box was pretty full. It was a small box. It was very you could handle it very good, and it was full of components. So it felt very worthy, and I think this was also. But you had again a very continuing style for the board games that you published with Blackfire. And No Siesta was the only exception to this because of the different box.
Yeah.
But then Asmodee bought Blackfire, and I personally think that it's also a testament to you making more value because of the brand you. Uh,
I have to say no, because as I said, I really they weren't interested at all in the publishing line. Really, I was at the table at several meetings what they needed because they were pathetic, really pathetic in distributing. It's a large company. Asmodee Germany is strong already in Germany, very strong, but they can't move the games to the retail stores. They
yeah,
were pathetic, and they needed somebody with brains in logistics, and that's
and they
why they
bought the big.
bought. That's why
Yeah,
they bought Blackfire. And I'd love to think they bought it because of the publishing line, but no,
okay.
they actually they did not. And again, I have to mention this. I have to mention this. When I was talking to about Michael Bruinsma earlier, the head of 999 Games, same is true for Sasha Dubinsky, the owner of Blackfire, and wonderful person, great businessman, strong vision, wonderful. And as you know, he is right now till the end of the year the CEO of Asmodee Germany. Then he steps back to Blackfire, but he has the brains, so he knows what he wants to do. Not always easy to work with him, but yeah. So
So it was a strategic decision from Asmodee to buy just the biggest distributor in Europe, and yeah, this was of course pretty smart as well. So
yeah.
let's just leave it with that, business wise. Okay, so um, Blackfire, you left Blackfire then, of course, and you moved on to Compass Games, which is um, as a sidekick, of course, side gig, which is a publisher of war games, I guess. And you introduced a few Euro games to them.
Yes. Before I talk about Compass, I have to get back to Matt, and he's saying, which is now the right moment. The psychology of box size versus games type is an interesting debate. I'm not sure anyone really knows what the right sizes are, and I have to agree, Matt. Yeah, we know more bigger boxes are probably important sometimes, but also small boxes can be very nice. And if you have too big a box, people say there is just air in it. If it's too small, retailers don't want to stock it because nobody sees it. And so this is really a thing that probably, again, I have to mention Asmodee knows a lot more about than we do, because they know what is selling well in which sizes. Yeah. Back to Compass Games. Yeah, this is a war
Yes.
game company. So as a war gamer, there are some war game companies out there. GMT Games is number one by a large margin. And then there are several companies who try to at least become number two, and one of them is Compass Games. And I knew the owners at that time; they were co-owners, and they approached me and they said, "Well, we want to broaden our lineup. We want to move to Euro type games, and
Hmm.
can you help us?" And I said yes, if this and this and this is happening. because it's very difficult. Nobody's waiting for Compass Games, and you need to do this and this and this. So we started, and we made some approaches and into this market, but actually it's the same thing. I also worked briefly for Hobby World, which is a totally different company from a
Oh
different
yes,
company.
I remember.
But people underestimate how much effort it is and how much money it costs to really make a footprint into the Eurotype market. So actually, and we can mention this, I stopped working for Compass Games
Oh,
some
I
time
didn't know.
ago, because no hard feelings, not at all, but I think it did not work out. Let's leave it at this way. And no hard feelings at all, but you need to do more to really achieve something in
Okay.
the German market. It's not easy. Nobody's waiting for you. It's already an overcrowded market.
Yeah. So with Compass Games, there were two smaller games, I guess, family type games, which was Traders of the Air, which was a reprint or new edition of Hansa by Michael Schacht. And Cargo Express was another one, but that was basically it that you did for.
Yes and no. So I worked on this huge science fiction game, which is the title by a Canadian author who is working for SpaceX. I forgot the title, sorry, Star, whatever. But this was way too complex a game, in my opinion. So I worked a little bit on this, but that's it. Yes, there was Cargo Express, which is a nice game by a Polish author. And this has an action queue mechanism. And in my opinion, it's a very good game. Traders of the Air, I think, is totally under the radar, because Hansa at that time, when it was released at Abacus, was a very strong title by
Yes.
Michael Schacht. And Traders of the Air adds even a little bit to it, and it has two ways to play it. But yeah, Compass Games has no reach, so nobody
Mm.
knows about this game. But I think it's a great game, and Michael Schacht, is a author who can distill everything into very few rules. Maybe this is a little bit against the trend where there's more Chrome and Chrome and Chrome and Chrome, but he is getting to the point,
Yeah.
and that is straight up in the air. There will be, and I worked on this game, but it's not out yet, there will be a game called Poor Man's Best Country by Matthias Kramer. Again, so you
Mm.
always have the same names here, which is in effect a new edition of Helvetia, which
Oh,
was
amazing.
which was not really well handled by Cosmos Games graphically,
Mm.
and never before has been done an English edition of this game. So, and Poor Man's Best Country moves basically the game to the US in the early 18th century in Pennsylvania. And this is the first time that it is out in an English edition. So this will be out by Matthias Kramer at Compass Games.
Yeah, I really love Helvetia. Was a very cool game, very great.
Yeah.
Love this to the bone. Okay, so let's address just one little thing about this because I knew that there was another game by Matthias who you were or what you were working on, and I think it was for Compass Games, which was a very complex political game called Weimar, which was about German history of the Weimar Republic. What about this game?
Yeah, and by the way, Matt is he has a better memory than me. The title of the game is Stellar Horizons. That's a science fiction
Oh yeah.
monster game, huge game.
Oh,
Yeah, now Weimar actually will be published, but not by Compass Games. So we were able to get it back. So this is the first time you hear this here. So a new use. Yes, it will be published in English language by Capstone Games. It will be in
whoa.
Germany co-printed by Skellig and Spielworxx. So this will be done, and we are working on this. It's a four-player game, and
Pure four player.
yeah, maybe we can get in some solo rules, but it's basically a four-player game, and
Okay.
it starts in 1918 at the end of the war, and it moves on to early 33 when the Weimar Republic, um, yeah, ended. Um, and the players are the communists, so KPD, the Social Democrats, so SPD, the Zentrum, so the Central Party, a democratic party, and the DNVP, which is a right-wing party. So the Nazis, the NSDAP, are not played by a player, which I think is a very smart move by Matthias, who wants to play the NSDAP. And the system actually plays it. So it can be that the NSDAP takes over during the game. But also, which I think is very brilliantly done by Matthias, it's not sure that the Weimar Republic will be toppled. It's possible in the game that the two democratic parties, so the Zentrum and the SPD, that they will win. And so they make it happen that there is neither a leftist takeover nor a rightist, nor a takeover from the right. Yeah.
Yes, Matthias is also one of my favorite designers of all time. So he's a very talented guy.
Yeah, and also Wargamer. You see,
Yeah,
all these people are coming from that background. No, not
yeah,
all.
but he shifted from Eurogames to more thematic war games. He's responsible for one of my favorite games of all times, Glenmore, and which was a Euro type of game. And yeah, okay, so I think we actually are now in a little time track here. Now we're in the current time, and I think maybe we could address a few questions that I got from Purple Shiba, which we know. Marcus, who cannot be here today, he sent me a message that he cannot be here, and I told him that I will say something bad about him, but
Yeah, hopefully. Which is totally right to tell something bad about him, yes.
so he's asking, is there a game that you did not want to publish, and but in the end you were thinking, oh, that would be a good idea to publish it, but you didn't.
Sure, for sure. I cannot remember a single title, but there are probably 50 that I rejected and later became probably good sellers or so. But if you are saying, if you're working that long in the industry and if you're saying, well, I never did this. This is totally wrong and bullshit, yeah. Because there's so much personal taste. Or there's a prototype on your table and you've already had three bad prototypes earlier in the day at a meeting. And then this one comes on. So the mood at the table is already bad.
Okay.
There are so many things that can influence you. Or you had a bad day and simply do not like the game. It happens. It simply does happen. You know that Carcassonne was rejected. Settlers of Catan at that time, as Wolfgang already explained, Wolfgang Lüttke, that was rejected, and even at Cosmos, people were really unsure if they want to do this game. It can happen, yeah.
Can happen, yes. So here's one very interesting question from a Twitter handle called VPJRponen. Vas
Wes,
is his name,
Wes
and
Apon.
he yes, and he said he's interested in your thoughts on similarities and dissimilarities, and possible untapped hybridization potential between Eurogames and Wargames. So maybe there's a connection that you can, maybe it's not. Is there potential for combining those themes? Uh,
A really interesting question. I think it has already happened. Um, You know, when I started wargaming in the late 70s, but this was already, also true for the 80s and 90s, and early this century, war games were very much process orientated. So you had, let's say, 10 game turns, and each game turn was the same. You started with movement, then combat, some reinforcements, done, and boop, 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 boop. Or look at Advanced Civilization, or now Mega Civilization, a game I still love, but it's very much process orientated. You do this, this, this. There's a long list, and when you are at the bottom of the list, new turn, you start at the top of the list. So very much process orientated. Whereas Eurotype games, more modern Eurotype games, they started to integrate things. You do something at the same time. Or Puerto Rico, Kingsville. Somebody is doing something, selecting an action from a range of actions, and all the other players are able to also do something. So downtime is reduced too in these ways. But I think for several years, and some of the pioneers in this regard were Fantasy Flight Games, especially Christian Petersen, also a wargamer, by the way. And he integrated Eurotype games and wargame mechanics in these ways. And nowadays you have not enough, but you already have some politics in war games, and you have Eurotype games that are very thematic and strong on topic. And of course, some designers like Cole Worley lead the way, and they have also shown that it's not necessary to simulate everything. SBI game from the 70s, I think I mentioned this even here, Campaign for North Africa, so a game on the African theater of war in the Second World War. There were different rules for water supply for Italians and Germans. Why? Because Italians are cooking pasta. So you have to bring in more water. And this is, of course, nonsense. It doesn't simulate anything, or at least it's not necessary for a simulation. And infamous traffic is very abstract, but it's a better simulation than lots of very rules-heavy war games on that period. And this is because Cole, who is also a wargamer, um, he knows Eurotype games as well. So I think, and Wes, of course, is the designer of a coin game, the one on the Russian-Finnish War at the end of the First World War. And so he knows that it's possible to have these different things interwoven in one design engine. And Coin is just doing this. Coin I find interesting to end here, because it is not that ludic as I would like to have, because one of my favorite wargame mechanisms is card-driven games. You have your hand of cards, and then first you select the card to play first, and then you also select at the same time, do I use it for action points or for the event or for something else? So this is difficult. This is really a very difficult decision if you have 5, 6, or 8 cards in your hand. Coin, and Volko Runke, who is the original designer, who was also here at the Spielworxx chat, he said, no, this is too much. And we put just 2 cards on the table. And everybody may potentially use them. One is a current card. That's the one that everybody can play with. And you have a brief glimpse into the future, because you know what the next card will be. So on one hand, this ludic element of playing a card and selecting a card, which is fun and which is wonderful in my opinion, and very important, has been cancelled. It's not in there anymore, but it allows people to concentrate more on the game board, on the other things. So it may not reduce rules complexity, but it reduces definitely play complexity, what to do right now.
Mm.
And I think Wes is using this coin with lots of modifications. So it's not just that he's just copying this. He made a smart move doing this. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so maybe let's wrap it up with one last thing here, and then we can go and maybe have a bite to eat. Um, I got a question from Martin Brinkmann, who is at Marty Brink on Twitter. And he had actually two questions, and I think it's a good finish up question here because it's about Spielworxx. And the first question is, when can we expect the new 18xx Saxony game to arrive?
To arrive, I don't know because this is part of the shipping crisis and production crisis. I don't know, but hopefully we can have it available for crowdfunding late this year.
Okay.
So this is the original plan, and at Conworks I will talk more about 1837 Saxonia. Yeah.
Okay, so then maybe you can have more information on how this is
Yeah.
developing. Okay, so the last question then maybe is about Gentis, and he's asking, do we have a chance to see a Gentis expansion in the future? Because he thinks the game is great, but it needs different victory path direly. So he's interested in the expansion for Gentis, and maybe you have something to tell him about this.
Yeah, I don't know what Stefan is planning, but I doubt that there will be an expansion for the base game. I doubt it. And also Conworks, October 1 and October 2nd, Stefan is my guest and he will talk about Gentes Epos, as it is called right now, which is a campaign type game for Gentes. So it uses some of the base game mechanics, but then expands on it a lot. But this is a standalone product and no expansion for the base games. I'm afraid.
Yeah, but I actually knew that there was a Epos game in development, and I think this is one of the games that I am very excited about. So, Stefan,
Yeah.
go to the table and develop, develop, develop. So, well, I think regarding myself, I think this was everything I wanted to know. I have all the questions that I got brought to you, and what do you think?
You did a great job. No, really, you
Oh,
did a great job, and now I appreciate it even more being a guest over here because it is not that easy to always talk and think at the same time. I'm glad that every other week normally I have some guests and I just have to ask some question. But Ode, you did a great job. And here, before we close, I have Chris here, and he's saying first that he is interested in more information on Weimar, which is forthcoming pretty soon. And getting back to campaigns for North Africa, which I mentioned, saying, sorry, Uli, I'm late with my prototype for that Italian military cooking water game I pitched to you, aren't I? Yeah, you brute. Better not come to Essen this year pitching it to me. And then Nick is saying, now come down off that ladder, Ode. Yeah, so. So what does Nick know? Nothing.
okay.
So
So I thought of something because I know that the last words you say are always the same, and I thought I pitch something to it so that we expand this expression. And this expression comes, at least I know it from German football supporters. And I just wanted to say, divided by colors, united by cause.
this is very nice. So I will repeat this in a second if I can remember it.
Okay.
No, but really, thank you very much, Ode. This was wonderful, and thank you to everyone viewing this, listening to this. And next week, I'll have a wonderful guest. It's the excellent and prolific designer Matthew Dunstan. So I'm really looking forward to that talk. And to everyone, and especially to Ode, thank you for your time, thank you for your questions, for everything. If you would like to see a special topic discussed or have a question that you'd like to ask in advance, please drop me a mail at uli@spielworxx.de. That is uli@spielworxx.de. So till next week, bleibt gesund, divided by colors, united by cause.
Cause.
Black Lives Matter. Bye bye. Bye.